Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica. On today's episode, we're taking a look at Dungeons & Dragons Shadow Over Mystara, released in 1996 by Capcom. This, to me, is the heavy hitter game on the CPS 2. I absolutely love this game. When I was a kid, I used to take all my spare change and go to the Dream Machine around the corner from my house and play it and try to beat it. I was never able to, but now that I have it in my collection and I can play on free play, definitely a lot easier. Before we get too much into the gameplay, just go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. Help us out. We really appreciate all your guys' support. So as far as the storyline of this game is concerned, it exists in the campaign of Mystara in Dungeons & Dragons, and I know absolutely nothing about that. I've never been a big Dungeons & Dragons fan. I played a few games, they're fun, but it's just not sort of a lifestyle or a gameplay that I've been interested in, that pen and paper sort of gameplay. I've always been a video gamer, so I can't really give you a ton of backstory on the game. If you know more about D&D, I'm sure you'll understand what's going on. But as far as from a gameplay standpoint is concerned, this is one of the best beat-em-ups I have ever played. You get a ton of role-playing elements in the game, obviously. Being a Dungeons & Dragons game, role-playing is going to be a huge component of the entire game. But as far as the soundtrack, the graphics, the gameplay are concerned, they are a potent mix that make this an almost perfect game to me. The only complaint I have about this, and this is really not a complaint, it's more just an observation, is this game is absurdly long for an arcade release. Having it in your home collection, you can sit down and play it for the couple hours it takes to beat. But actually beating this game in an arcade would take a long time and a lot of quarters. The challenge is fair, except a few bosses can be very cheap, but I'm really surprised it's actually made it into an arcade and wasn't just designed for a home release on something like the Super Nintendo, because action role-playing beat-em-up game in an arcade is something that kind of seems strange to me. Although Capcom had a history of this, they had some role-playing beat-em-ups on the original CPS system as well, so it's not unheard of, but I do still find it interesting that this is something that made it to an arcade release. As far as playing this at home, there are a few ways to do so. You can download this on Xbox Live Arcade. It is an HD remake of it, so the graphics do change slightly. It's not my favorite way to play, but it is definitely, outside of emulation, the cheapest way to play. Secondarily, there is a Japanese-only release of this game and the prequel to it on the Sega Saturn. That's going to run you around $100 to $150. It is still going to be cheaper than the CPS 2 boards, which are going to be between $300 and $400. That seems to be kind of the sweet spot price for all CPS 2 boards that aren't Pro Gear. All the good games are in that $300 to $400 range. Name my character Morty. I name all my characters Morty. Don't ask me why, it's just the name that I've been using since I've been a kid to name all my characters in arcade and console games. You do get a lot of options as to what you want to do next in the game, and that is that role-playing element. You can select different options to go different places. You can kind of extend your gameplay by helping people out along the way, or you can take the direct route towards the end of the game. Now that we're on this train section, you get a lot of that great scrolling in the background. It's not the most graphically impressive game on the CPS2, but as far as everything that makes up the whole, it is very impressive as far as the setting is concerned. Considering how vast the D&D universe is, and how everything is text-based, the artists that made these characters must have had a lot of inspiration to work from, because everything is described so vividly in those D&D texts. That's why this entire game just feels like a visual representation of that D&D universe. You'll see that we beat that boss right there. Pretty easy to beat him. The later bosses do get hard to the point where I feel like they're quarter munchy cheap, but considering I'm not actually pumping quarters into this game, I'm playing it on my own personal board, it really doesn't matter too much. The nice thing about this game is that you have so many different ways to play it. There's so many different characters at the front. You can do your classic brawler and just beat the ever-loving hell out of all the enemies in front of you, or you can play as an elf character that has a lot of different magic and ranged attacks. So there's a lot of versatility in how you want to approach the game, not just the path you take through it, but your overall gameplay style of the character that you do choose. In a way, your character selection feels more like you're picking a character in a 2D fighting game, where you kind of pick the character you're most comfortable with, you learn their moveset, and you use them exclusively. So now that we've got this boss battle down, you don't actually beat them, they teleport away, you're going to get some story elements in the game. And there is a lot more story in this game than there would be in pretty much any other arcade game I've played. It feels like it was almost designed to be ported over to a home console after it's released. I'm surprised that this didn't get a release on the Super Nintendo. Obviously there would have to be some graphical changes to the game to make it work on that system, but the fact that this didn't come out until the Saturn and only in Japan is really surprising to me, because this game was so popular in North America. Pretty much every arcade I ever went to back in the 90s had this game right on its floor ready to play. So now what I'm going to let you do is watch a little bit of the gameplay. Definitely want you to be able to hear at full volume some of the soundtrack to this game, because we haven't mentioned sound yet, but all the different sound effects and musical tracks in this game are quite excellent as well. We'll come back towards the end of the video and talk a little bit more about the game and let you know what we're doing next week. But otherwise, enjoy the fight against Green Dragon here, and we'll be back in just a second. I know that we're close to beating this boss right here. This is one of the bosses that seems a little bit cheaper just in how much is going on. Definitely use a lot of continues here, but whatever, like I said, no quarters. What we're doing is getting really close to my favorite part of the game. It's my favorite part of the game for two reasons. One, the gameplay is just that good, and secondarily, one of the graphical effects that Capcom used when developing the game just looked like something that I had never seen before back in 1996. Even to this day, when I look at it, I'm impressed by it. I'm still not 100% sure how they achieved it on the hardware. So what we're going to be taking a look at right now is this large spiral staircase that the character walks up as it rotates in the background. In 1996, my kid brain was blown by this. I had never seen anything on the Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis that could compare, and that's when I really knew that this game was something special. I know it's weird that just a spiral staircase sticks in my memory so much, but it definitely does. So now, this boss battle right here, we're finally able to beat the boss. We don't have to wait for him to teleport away later on in the story, and it's a decent boss battle, not my favorite in the world, but a lot of magic use definitely goes a long way towards defeating him. The fight took me about 3 to 4 minutes in real time. I definitely condensed it down a lot just to keep the video moving along. But that's what I mean about this game, definitely taking a prolonged period of time to play, which at home is amazing. In an arcade, I never had enough quarters to actually get to the end. I probably also wasn't that great of a player, but that's neither here nor there. So now we're entering into the last stages of the game, and you get these little signposts that give you details and lore about the characters, and we find out that those gargoyles cannot be defeated by normal attacks, so you do need to rely on some of that magic. Just like in the D&D games, there are some enemies that have certain skill sets or other attributes, which means they have to attack them or approach them in a certain way. And in an arcade game, that's a little bit extra layer of death, where you have to actually worry about how you attack an enemy. That's not something you get in normal everyday games. So now we're getting into the last and final boss here. The interesting part of this game as well is that there are multiple endings for each character. Depending on which route you take, how much experience points you were able to gain along the way, you're going to get different epilogues for each character. Each character has 4 endings, so that's going to give you around a total of 20 different endings that you can get. Sin, you have to attack multiple times before you even find a health bar, and it is very difficult to take this enemy down. Even without having to pump quarters in, I was still wondering, am I actually doing damage? It had been a couple years since I'd played this from start to finish, so I couldn't exactly remember. But what you do is watch the end of Dungeons & Dragons Shadow Over Mystara. Really appreciate you guys watching this episode. If you could do us a huge favor, go down below and hit the like and subscribe button. It takes us a long time to make each and every one of them, and we really appreciate your guys' support. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next Tuesday for another episode in the CPS 2 series. Thanks so much. Have a great week. Bye-bye.